Hi everybody, welcome back. So last time we spoke about your victim, okay? And some lasting effects that your abuse has on your victim. Today, we're going to get into a little bit of relapse prevention, and we're going to do relapse prevention for a few videos. The point is, it's all about how to make sure that you stop your abusive behavior. If you've committed a sexual offense, chances are you have more than one victim. It didn't just happen once. That means that after the first time, you relapsed, you did it again. Relapse prevention, in the way I'm going to talk about it, is something that has been used not only with sex offenders, but also with alcoholics and with drug addicts. The tools that are taught are very effective. I want to stress again that there is no cure for sexual deviancy. I'm not going to fix you. What I'm trying to do is give you some tools to succeed so that you can, in the future, make the right choices. You chose to commit an offense before. So now you can choose to do the right thing from here on out. If you allow your thoughts and your feelings and your behaviors to become distorted, your sexual problems will return. It is possible to live crime-free if you follow the relapse prevention model. If you walk around thinking that it is impossible for you to commit another crime, you're only kidding yourself. If you did it once, it can happen again if it hasn't already. It is like an alcoholic saying, I can handle my problem. But then he goes into a bar to meet a friend and says, I can have just one beer. And before you know it, one leads to another and so on. So the first step in not drinking again is realizing that if you're not vigilant, it will happen again. Sexual abuse is the same. You need to be prepared and you need to have a plan. And that is what relapse prevention is about. The first step is to become aware of your abuse cycle, which we spoke about before. We also talked about defense mechanisms that you use. Now, in speaking about relapse prevention, we're going to start by talking about the high-risk situations or events that may be in front of you. These are signs that you're on the road to reoffending. There are two kinds of high-risk factors. There are external risk factors, and this might have to do with where you are, or who you're with, or what you're doing, or what you're about to do. Watching porn, that might be an external risk factor. Maybe you just happen to go somewhere where you know young boys hang out. That is an external risk factor. Driving around aimlessly with no destination in mind. You know you're going to end up somewhere where you shouldn't be, and that is an external risk factor. Then there are internal risk factors, and that has to do with the way you're feeling or how you're responding to stress. For example, if you're having work problems or family problems, you feel stressed and anxious, and you might try to relieve this tension by masturbating to sexual fantasies, and those sexual fantasies may be deviant fantasies. When you get angry, you might start thinking inappropriate things like, she owes me sex. Those are internal risk factors at play because that's the stuff that you're telling yourself or responding to the stress or the tension you have. So let me give you an example of risk factors first in the case of alcoholism, because sometimes that's an easier example to understand. So let's talk about Bob. He has a history of alcohol abuse, and he's been diagnosed as an alcoholic. He went through treatment programs, and he stopped drinking. He's been sober for 6 months. Now he's walking down the street, and he runs into a friend of his, and he's walking around the street with no destination. He bumps into this old friend Joe, who used to be a drinking buddy. Bob is lonely, and he's glad to meet Joe, even though that he remembers that one of Joe's favorite activities is drinking. So they're standing on the street talking, and Bob knows that Joe will use every opportunity to drink. And so Joe asks Bob if he'd like to sit down somewhere so they can talk more comfortably, and Bob says sure. Without saying where they're going, Joe leads the way to the nearest bar. When they arrive, Bob knows that he shouldn't go in, but he decides not to tell Joe that he knows that he has a drinking problem. He himself has a drinking problem because he's embarrassed, and he doesn't want Joe to think he's weak. So instead, he says to himself, I will just say no to a drink. They go in, and Joe immediately tells the bartender to bring him a drink. He remembers Bob's favorite drink. He orders that for him without even asking Bob. Now Bob's in a bind because he doesn't want to refuse Joe's friendly offer and possibly offend him. He also doesn't want to drink the drink. But he says to himself, what's this going to hurt? I'm just going to have one. Several hours later, you know what happens. Bob leaves the bar drunk and broke. All right? So, in talking about relapse prevention, there are several things all along the way that Bob could have done to pull himself out of this. So let's talk about that. First, when Bob finished treatment, he should have found some way to fill those gaps in his life. Find some new healthy activities. All right? Just stopping drinking or stopping sexual abuse, for that matter, is not enough, okay? Because you're left with all this time that you used to spend either drinking or planning a sexual offense. Now you've got all this empty time. You need to fill that time. So he should have redirected himself into some healthy activities. Secondly, he should have kept that conversation with Joe brief. He knew who this guy was. Sometimes you have to give up some old friends who are bad influences on you and bring you into and allow you to bring yourself into those high-risk situations. These friends are a dangerous attachment to the past. All right. He could have made something up. He could have said to Joe, I'm late for an appointment. I have to go. He could have gotten out of it. Third, instead of just blindly following Joe to that bar, he could have said, let's go somewhere else. Let's go to a coffee shop. It didn't have to be that he was passive and followed Joe into that bar. Next, he shouldn't have been embarrassed to tell Joe that he doesn't drink anymore. All right? By being direct and honest, he could have kept himself out of trouble, and he may have helped his friend too. All right. He could have stopped at that front door, even when he saw where he was being led. He could have stopped at that front door. He could have said, let's go somewhere else. Now, by the time you've got that drink in your hand, it's really taking a superhuman effort not to drink it once it's in your hand. And I understand that. But even at that point, you can put the drink down. Okay? He never should have taken that first drink, no matter what he felt, no matter how embarrassed he was, no matter what the pressure was, because the point between the first drink and the last drink, not that far apart. All right? So we've talked about, I've given you an example of all those steps along the way, what Bob could have done, what the tools he should have used. And next time, I'm going to give you an example as far as a sex offender. Same thing, same kind of scenario. How many steps along the way you can stop yourself, because there's absolutely no excuse. Every point along the way, you're making a choice. Every point along the way, just like Bob. And next time, I'm going to give you an example with a sexual offender. All right? Until next time, please subscribe. Please share these videos and connect on Facebook, on Twitter, and I'll be glad to hear from you if you have any comments or questions. And until I see you next time, be well.